How's it going, everybody? Today we're going to be looking at the Samsung S95D, the Samsung S90D, the LG G4, and the LG C4, and we're going to see which one is going to do gaming the best. And the purpose of this video is to show you these TVs gaming with multiple different games. I'm not going to just waste your time and tell you that it has 4 HDMI 2.1 ports, 144 Hz support. You definitely know all that stuff by now. What I do want to help you with is just to show you the difference between all of these TVs to help you make a better buying decision at the end of the day. You can see a lot of these things on the camera, and I'm also going to describe what I seen while I had them side by side. So I had the luxury of showing you all of these TVs all running at the same time through a four-way splitter, and we are going to show you what settings the TVs are on the screen right now. So if you're curious to see what those settings are, now you know. And the first game that we're looking at here is going to be Elden Ring, which does have more of a natural tone to it, although you do see color brightness advantages still for the Samsung OLED TVs. Now, why this is because these are QD OLED TVs, so they're going to have a color brightness advantage. Now, you'll also notice that the C4 does seem to always have just a more muted presentation to the colors, and that's because it loses color in game mode. So that's something that you're always going to want to keep in mind throughout this whole entire presentation. The G4, however, doesn't lose color brightness in game mode. It retains its color brightness from inside of game mode and outside of game mode, as if you toggle on and off game mode, you will not notice a reduction of color brightness or really luminance in general. That's not going to drop at all for the G4 in a noticeable degree. It might be slightly darker in game mode, but it is not that noticeable. Where the C4, it is not the case, and then you are taking a bigger hit in game mode with the C4 in mind. So that was Elden Ring. Let's take you to Hot Wheels Unleashed. You can see that the color luminance in general here is going to be very apparent. The Hot Wheels sign looks like it's not even lit up on the LG C4, whereas all the other TVs does look like it's lit up a little bit. And the S95D looks like it is the brightest of them all, with the S90D being second place and the G4 being third place. But you could see the C4 definitely struggling with this in mind. As we speed up through the race, you can see that we are going to have a brighter presentation on the S95D and the S90D with color brightness in mind. The G4 definitely coming in third in this, but you can also see sometimes where the G4 does appear to be just as bright as the S95D, if not brighter in certain games. This game, though, being one of the ones that I think the S95D does excel in. As we look at some of the track elements here, you can see once again we have color brightness advantages coming through right away on the Samsung OLED TVs. The C4 really lacking color brightness here, and it is very apparent. It's also worth noting that if I kept this image on the screen for the C4, you would see image retention outlines, since it is a very bright image. And this is something that will stay on your TV for a little bit and then slightly fade away. This is only really noticeable on the C4 and the S90D, but the S90D does fade away fairly quickly, and the C4 stays around quite a bit longer, and it is noticeable, it is distracting in your game mode, so do keep that in mind. So just in regards to the whole entire image here with the color brightness, you'll see that the S95D is the clear winner here, with the S90D being in second place, and the G4 is actually doing a pretty good job for being a W OLED. Of course, the MLA enhancement does help with color brightness with this in mind, and also it's not losing the color brightness capabilities in game mode this year, so that is a really nice thing to see, where the G3 would have suffered just like the C4 is suffering right now. The C4 is very similar to the G3 last year, except for it just does not have the MLA capabilities, but that didn't help it in game mode last year. The next game on this list is going to be Starfield. Now, what I noticed with Starfield in mind is that S95D did look like the brighter TV most of the time. It held the brightness mostly over the S90D and S95D, but at times the S95D and S90D could look pretty similar, if not the same. And then at times the G4 and the S95D, they look pretty identical except for the sky. It does look different on the Samsungs than it does on the LGs. Not really sure what the sky is supposed to look like here, but if you take a look at the sky, and this is apparent in all the games, the S90D and the S95D does a much better job at eliminating color banding. So yes, gradients are a lot smoother on the Samsung OLED TVs, where the LGs are going to suffer from color banding, and it is more noticeable on those TVs. There's no way of cleaning it up, as smooth gradation does not work in game mode. Now, really quickly, before we dive into more gaming comparisons, if you guys are buying a TV anytime soon, no matter what TV you buy, if it's one of these four TVs, great. If it's something else, that's okay too. I just want to help you find the best TV possible. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out in the comments below. I'm always answering questions. And the next time that you decide on buying a TV, all I ask is that you use one of my affiliate links in the description below before you do so. Thank you guys so much for your support. Moving on to the next game, Sea of Thieves. I like to use this game to look at color brightness, especially when we're talking about the sunsets and the sunrises in this game. I really think that it is fairly noticeable that the S95D is the clear winner in this game. It is more capable than all the TVs at displaying color brightness, and overall, it is more capable of just brightness in general in terms of the actual performance of the TVs. You'll also notice that the S90D will appear to be lifted in the dark areas more than the S95D. The S95D suffers from this a little bit as well, but bumping down the ST2084 just a little bit will help with this if you do not like that over brightened presentation. Now, when it comes down to the G4, it actually does hold its own at times against the S90D. Again, you can see through this image right here that color brightness is once again at a disadvantage for the LG C4, where every TV is showing some sort of yellow on the screen other than the LG C4, which does not have the yellow within this. So we move on now to the Nintendo Switch, where we have Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. And this is going to be a real noticeable difference here because we are using standard dynamic range. SDR gaming, aka standard dynamic range gaming, is going to be what you would have if you played a Nintendo Switch on your TVs, or something that was just limited to not having an HDR signal. So this is going to be where the Samsung TVs have a significant advantage, and that is because they have a brighter game mode presentation overall in standard dynamic range. And the SDR gaming presentation on the LG OLEDs is somewhat limited because peak brightness is locked out for whatever reason on the LG OLED TVs. Even on their latest LG G4, there's no option to select peak brightness. There is a workaround if you're not using something like the Nintendo Switch. If you have something that supports ALLM, you do have a way to make your image brighter overall on the LG G4 and the LG C4. For the Nintendo Switch, which doesn't have ALLM support, you'll notice a significant difference. The S95D does appear to be the brighter TV overall. The S90D is a slight second, and then the G4 is slightly behind the S90D, although it does look brighter than the G4. The G4 does a good enough job for SDR gaming in mind, while the C4, in my opinion, just feels a little bit dull for SDR gaming for my tastes personally. Now, one thing I do want to talk about where we have a little bit of an advantage for the LG OLED TVs, some games are going to be presented a lot darker than they probably should be in actuality. For example, some of these sports games just don't have really good HDR implementation, in my opinion, as the HDR presentation where it's supposed to be a daylight scene appears to be way darker than it should. This is where dynamic tone mapping can be handy for the LG OLED TVs. The dynamic tone mapping usually works where if you're having a darker presentation overall, it'll overbrighten it. If you have a bright presentation overall, it'll darken it. So sometimes you don't want to use it and sometimes you do want to use it. It is really something that depends on your personal preference and the situation that you face. In a darker HDR game where I think it should be brighter overall, this is where I actually like the LG OLEDs over the Samsung OLED TVs, as their active tone mapping doesn't do as good of a job at showing me this type of presentation that I would want out of a sports game. But it is noticeable in both the golf game that I tried from EA Sports and Madden 24, and it is a very noticeable thing. The G4 appears to be significantly brighter than all four TVs. The C4 does appear to be a little bit brighter than the S90D when you have dynamic tone mapping on, and even a little bit brighter than the S95D with dynamic tone mapping on. It's worth noting that if you do want a brighter presentation overall for the Samsung OLED TVs, you can use active in combination with a contrast enhancer, which is going to overbrighten the image even more, but you will definitely lose details in a lot of your colors, where you will lose a lot of information within the picture. If this doesn't bother you and you just want an overall brighter presentation, then you will probably like using contrast enhancer to make these games look a little bit brighter. Now, another thing you should consider is features, and you should look at the features that are involved with all the TVs to see if they have one that you really want over the other TV. For example, with Game Motion Plus on the Samsung TVs, you can have motion interpolation with your game mode at a low latency. That's something that the LG G4 and C4 do not offer, but on the flip side, the LG C4 and G4 offer a better multi-view overall with the ability to have multiple HDMI ports in your multi-view signal. And I know a lot of you guys are going to mention Dolby Vision Gaming, but to me, that is a non-factor. Dolby Vision Gaming is absolutely useless. First of all, there's not a lot of support for it, and the support that is out there for it results in a poorly tuned Dolby Vision game mode. So that is just something that I honestly wouldn't even bother wasting your time with. Keep gaming in HDR10. That is most likely going to be the way you want to game. So no matter where you go with your gaming TV choice, I think it was really clear within this presentation that the LG C4 is not something that I would pick for game mode in mind, which I know might sound a little controversial and might sound like it goes against the grain of what everybody else is saying. But I promise you, I've tested these TVs extensively, and this is a theme that we've seen throughout the years, where the LG C series is going to be lacking color brightness in game mode, and this is something that was apparent on the G3 as well, but thankfully LG did fix it for the LG G4, so I can give the LG G4 a stamp of approval for gaming, and the S90D and the S95D from Samsung also get that stamp of approval, where I just cannot do the same thing for the LG C4. You know, you can get the LG C4, you'll be happy with the gaming presentation overall, but the point is, you will get a better presentation for the same amount of money from a TV like the S90D, or you could even go cheaper with the S90C and get a better presentation overall with a ton of different aspects in mind. So yes, in my opinion, the S90D much better than the C4 in regards to game mode. But what about outside of game mode? Well, I did do that comparison in a separate video, and you can see that video right here. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.